Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. I'm your host, as always, Jeremy, here trying to bring a little normalcy to this world. And what happened today? Well, guess what? It just may. This is actually going to be one of my more normal episodes compared to other ones, and I am very happy about that because, as one of the top rated science podcasts on Good Pods, I have to every once in a while bring a little science into this rather than just the paranormal, which is speculative science at best, a lot of times. But I'm glad to be joined to help me on this quest by Dr. Fred Moss, mental health advocate, a psychiatrist, and so much more. I could have listed 5,000 different things here, but we'll let him tell us about that. How you doing tonight, Dr. Fred?
It's great to be here. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Well, I guess I'd start this interview out the same way I start every interview. What brought you down this path? Normally, I say what brought you down this path into the paranormal or spiritualness, but I guess spiritualness kind of still applies to some degree with anything with mental health. So,
Oh, for sure. When you talk about speculative science, I would say for sure that speculative science is what psychiatry, the conventional psychiatry world, is really all about. And ultimately, it's a speculation that is not accurate. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today. But, what brought me down this path is that I was born in a family that had a couple brothers who were 10 and 14 years older than me, and my my parents. And I imagine there was a fair amount of chaos and disarray at the time. And I was brought in to actually bring joy and peace and love to that family, I believe. And that's what I did. I came out with, hit the time card and ready to go. And I was a bundle of joy early on. And, the idea of communication and, conversation was always very enchanting to me. I literally remember being in my playpen in the living room and watching my brothers and my parents speak and wishing that someday I could be that big of a guy to actually get that done. And I thought that was going to happen in school and stuff, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen in school. It did, that's not where open discourse is encouraged. And in elementary school, I was sure talker. I was precocious kid. After all, I had these two brothers, and there's no elementary school teacher that I had that ever forgot having Fred as a student. And the idea was that I was a disruptor, and I knew a lot. I knew math, and I knew a little bit of reading and a little bit of writing even before I arrived in kindergarten. But I really knew is that I wanted to communicate, and I could see that that was the essence of what was a human. And over time, this has just got more and more emphasized and amplified as life went on. And I wasn't going to learn how to communicate in the conventional world. So I learned how to do it, like I'd say, in the streets or after class or after school or when I was skipping or, and whatever it was. That's where I learned how to communicate. And when high school was over, because high school was even worse than junior high, which was worse than elementary school, I decided I would go to college because I heard that maybe I'd communicate there. I went to, 40 miles away because they had great helmets and they were close. I went to the University of Michigan, and I was there for about a year and a half, and, that didn't work out. I was in the engineering school because I had these great math scores, and I didn't want to be an engineer. So I left, got on a bus, and came across the country to Berkeley to find myself. And, there I found myself and communication and all, but it was unsustainable. My brothers and my parents had a different idea for me. They told me there was this new industry out there that they wanted me to get in touch with. They thought it was, probably something to do good in the future. It was called computers, and maybe you'd heard of it. I don't know. It was the whole idea was that, that computers were going to take over the world. And they were the biggest and essentially the only computer in Michigan was at the University of Michigan. So I went back to Michigan with the idea of learning how to be a computer expert. Punch cards and batch jobs later inside of this computer building, I learned that I didn't want to be a computer expert. And off I went again. And before too long, I told my mom, I'm never going back to school again. And, she's like, okay, Fred, but you got to get a job. And so she got me an application for a childcare worker at a state mental health facility in Northwest Detroit. And I began that job in 1980. And frankly, that was a great job. I would even say that I'm still just simply a glorified childcare worker 44 years later. The idea being that I learned how to communicate there. That was what was encouraged. I connected with these so-called kids who were so-called in troubled states. And really in that connection, there was a lot of healing and a lot of love and a lot of, harmonic resonance. And it was beautiful to be a childcare worker, but I didn't want to be a childcare worker the rest of my life. So I eventually made the decision to go back to school one more time so that I could become a psychiatrist. And why? Not because I like psychiatry. Frankly, I couldn't stand psychiatry. I hated psychiatry. But I went back in because psychiatry was shifting. It was shifting to medicine. It was, when the psychiatrist at the facility would get called, he would talk, maybe Timmy or Tony had gotten into a fight or Jimmy was up too late. He'd come down, talk to the kid for a few seconds, talk to us for a few more seconds, and then go in the room and write an order. And then we'd have to go retrieve the child and hold them down in the quiet room and give them some sort of injection of some terrible mental health, like, I don't know, antipsychotic cocktail. And he would go into a stupor. And if he was in that stupor for a day, we'd call that a success. That was just barbaric and unacceptable to me. So I thought that I could bring communication into psychiatry. My brother was already a psychiatrist, 14 years older than me. So I knew that there was a pathway, and off I went to complete school, which I did, and then go to medical school, and then go to residency, and then become a child and adolescent psychiatrist. So when I came out, I was typecast to be a diagnostician and a pharmacologist, two things that I absolutely never wanted to do. But for the next several years, that's what I was asked, and that's what I, in some ways, found myself forced to do in order to keep my business. I did that for about 15 years until I stopped, and I decided to take people off of medicine because I no longer believed, I wasn't really aligned with the idea of the diagnosis that I was giving people. And I really knew in my heart of hearts that the medicine I was giving people was not helping them, and frequently was actually hurting them. I took an oath, first do no harm. And that wasn't aligned with who I was. So I began to take people off of medicine. And slowly but surely, I took a lot of my lower risk and medium risk patients in my practice off of medicine, and they got better, way better. They got aligned with their core self. And frankly, often their actual initial diagnosis would disappear in the process. And then I started traveling around. My practice kind of closed down because most of my patients got better. And I kind of worked myself out of a job. And I started traveling around the country and doing psychiatry in all sorts of different places. Again, with the idea of trying to find myself, I believe. And I worked in many different states, and then began to work even around the world, in Thailand and Bhutan and in Nepal and Israel and France and Italy and England. And really got to see how psychiatry or mental health or mental illness is dealt with in all these different cultures. And what I saw was the essence of humanity. I was really fortunate to talk to a lot of treatment providers and a lot of so-called mental health patients or clients or customers or whatever they call them in a particular culture. And what I learned is that each and every one of us, more than anything, really just wants to be heard and wants to be seen for who we are, like who we really are, whatever that means. And the way to do that is to listen radically to people, and then to speak honestly our truest self, our core genuine self, our actual honest, authentic self. And, in order to do that, we have to actually adjust from what we learned back there in the conventional educational system. And that's where we learned how to be someone different than who we are in order to protect the person that we really are. Now, I help people with that. That's how you can see the books behind me there, Find Your True Voice and The Creative 8. And I've written some courses as well. And I became someone who was really, really, really interested in helping people get to who they really are. I was a founder of my brand, which is called Welcome to Humanity. And I think now that goes, without saying, basically saying that humanity is difficult. It's very challenging out there. It's extremely challenging.
Amen.
Very stimulating. It's very, very, it's there's a lot of obstacles and hurdles to get through every single minute. And if we're uncomfortable in this world, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us at all. As I think Krishnamurti said, it's no sign of mental health to be well adjusted to a sick society. He's very correct, of course. So the idea that we're uncomfortable is that's where psychiatry comes in. The idea, at least these days, when you're depressed or anxious or afraid, when you're scattered or hopeless or awkward, when your thoughts are going too fast or too slow, or maybe even your intuition is out loud, like it's auditory hallucinations or anything like that, you think there's something wrong with you, and you go to a psychiatrist, it gets confirmed that there's something wrong with you, and then they give you a medicine that actually makes something wrong with you. And that's how that really works. So that's why it's a speculative science. Does psychiatry really work? In a conventional way, it doesn't work to do what it promises. I would say no. It's only geared to, slow down the deterioration or keep things steady. The psychiatry doesn't pretend to heal any conditions at all, but it can be healed. Your condition, the so-called condition that we have, the difficulties or the imbalance or the discomfort that we have in life can be healed. What's the source of that healing? I think by now you can get where I'm headed with that. That would be through human connection, through a resonating, harmonic human connection like we're creating today. And I became a real advocate for that over the last several years. And that's where those 2 books, and that's where my courses come from. That's where Welcome to Humanity comes from. And that's how I eventually got to be the psychiatrist or the undoctor. What's the undoctor? Well, the undoctor is a moniker that I got from a friend a few years ago who knows how I think about things. And what I do is I undiagnose, unmedicate, and then undoctrinate people, pulling them out of the conventional system because, in fact, it's simply speculative science, which is gearing people to get worse. These treatments actually often make people worse. They induce or increase or perpetuate or even cause the symptoms they're marketed to deal with. And I can't be a proponent of that, but I can be a proponent of creating a space for you to heal or for them to heal. And the way that I do that, of course, is by listening radically, creating a space, using multiple different techniques of, gratitude or meditation or watching what you eat or watching who you're with or watching your sleep or taking nature walks or being creative, art, music, dancing, singing, drama. There's a lot of things that we can do to detox ourselves and re-find ourselves, rediscover who we are at the core, connecting with other humans. And from that space, there has never been a drug ever created in any toxicology lab or any pharmaceutical companies, laboratories in those high rises around the world that even rivals to a little degree the magic that happens when we connect with another person, no matter where they are in their life.
Wow. I mean, okay, a lot to break down there, but honestly, not too much to break down though, because you made it very clear. I mean, and as all my listeners do know, I am a huge opponent of Big Pharma. Mm-hmm. I think Big Pharma is one of the worst things in the world. I think they literally are just all about the money and they don't care what their pills do to people. Mm-hmm. And I mean, yes, there are people out there who need medication for things such as diabetes, stuff like that. But I mean, stuff that actually needs to be regulated in the body. When it comes to mental health, though, do pills really do anything more than just cover up the issue? No, they don't. All they do is cover up the issue or make it worse or give you another issue that you have to deal with.
Yeah, a lot of people think that that's what they do, that they're just a Band-Aid. It hasn't been my experience that they're just a Band-Aid. My experience is that they're a Band-Aid with a razor blade embedded in it. So it's actually way different than just a Band-Aid. If all it did was truly cover up the issues with no other problems, I could be a semi-proponent of prescribing them. That isn't what they do. They actually cause significant problems on a regular basis, not only in the world of side effects, but frequently actually causing or perpetuating the actual symptoms they're marketed to treat. In other words, if you want to know what psychosis is, if you think you've never had it, try taking antipsychotics for a while, and now you'll get psychotic. And that's why doctors don't take antipsychotics. They wouldn't take them on a bet. They know better than to actually take the medicines that they prescribe. Of course, this isn't true with mindfulness or meditation or nature walks or watching organic foods or, drinking lots of water or being of service or doing creativity. Doctors and all healers and clients and patients, all of us who are on this journey called life together, can do those things safely. They don't have inherent side effects. They don't make things worse. And they bring together a level of genuine, authentic resonance that allows us to communicate with others, which, as I've already emphasized, is, in my very real opinion, the source of all healing.
I agree. I mean, this podcast has had a lot of people on it in the last 200-something episodes. A lot of spiritual people who believe meditation does more for somebody than any pill will ever do.
For sure it does.
And, I mean, I am also a big proponent of Reiki. I don't know how you feel about Reiki, but I mean...
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yep.
I mean, I worked with a Reiki master for a good 6 months and felt things I didn't know I could feel through a computer.
Exactly.
Like, it was just unbelievable. But let me ask you the question that people are going to want to hear the answer to. And I'm actually going to give you an example to work with. Because I'm going to ask, how do you undoctor a mental illness. And the example I'm going to give is my daughter has ADHD.
Yeah.
How do you undoctor that? How do you actually heal that without medication like
Yeah,
Ritalin?
absolutely can be healed without medication. Now, the truth is, I'd have to meet your daughter. And I want to make a brief disclaimer, which is there are a number of people out there who are pretty sure that they have found the right therapist, the right doctor, the right treatment, the right medication, the right protocols, and that they wouldn't trade it for anything. And this is the best that life's going to get. They don't even want to trade, this for door number 2 under any circumstances. And if that's the case, you should stay exactly where you are, for sure. If there's any part of life where you resonate that you have found the very best it's going to get, by all means, do everything you can to stay exactly with that. My conversation is for the hundreds of millions of people who don't feel that way, who have entered the mental health field one way or another by themselves or for people they care for or people they care about, and have entered the system and feel uncared for or undercared for or overcared for or over-medicated, under-medicated, over-treated, under-treated, all of those things. Now, what about ADHD? So the story is with ADHD, and I always am concerned because parents are really the ones who make decisions to put their kids on ADHD meds and have them be on ADHD meds. And yeah, it seems like the ADHD meds are helping your daughter more than likely, and they probably are, unless they're not. And if they're not, we've reached a point already where you have determined that the treatment itself frequently causes or increases or perpetuates the symptoms it's marketed to treat. It has so many issues associated with it. Once you get to that, you can start getting that ADHD itself is a very, very odd diagnosis. The idea that there's a defense, there's 2 Ds in ADHD. There's deficiency and there's disorder, as if there's something wrong. The truth is the school and the efforts to treat, to teach your daughter what she needs to teach are where the deficiency and the defectiveness and the actually exists. So what should we do? Well, your daughter needs to sit still. She needs to stop, she needs to somehow gather up and be able to do her assignments and do her homework and somehow stay on task and all the things that whatever her issues are. And sorry for leaping. I'm not sure I'm even addressing what her particular issues are. But can we actually rework that conversation so that we start really realizing that your daughter maybe isn't as abnormal as either you or they think that she is? Is that possible through conversation and reconfiguration and recontextualization? In my experience, it's definitely possible. It requires a willingness to go down that street. And again, if you found something that's working or you're happy with the way it's going.
We haven't.
We shouldn't go, then you shouldn't move from that. But if you haven't and you want some assistance with really adjusting that, that's the kind of work that I do as a childcare worker, 45 years of a childcare worker.
I mean, we have medication. We've tried different medications. She refuses to take medication now. And I mean, it's just she can't focus. Like
I hear
you try to talk to her, and it's like her mind's 5 million other places besides trying to talk to you at that moment.
Yeah, and we could probably look at different areas of life that have her more scattered and having trouble aligned. Look, Krishnamurti said it. It is no sign of mental health to be well adjusted to a sick society. It just isn't. There just isn't. And we don't know what's going on with her, but whatever's going on has her linear thinking or her capacity to stay on task or stay focused be disrupted. Without talking about her too long, and I don't feel that comfortable talking about your daughter very long, so without actually meeting her, I hope you can respect that.
Of course.
I just want to say that, do I feel fairly confident that we could alter the pathway of your daughter's care? For sure we could, in a very positive way. I feel very, very confident about that.
All right. I mean,
how old is she?
6.
Oh yeah, she's pretty young to have been on medicine. That's and to have been delivered that.
It's within the last 3-4 months, but
yeah,
I mean,
for sure, understood.
I mean, it's just because in kindergarten they kind of let her go, because it's kindergarten, whatever. But I mean, in first grade, her teacher right away was like reaching out, like Bella, she does not stay focused. She does not finish her assignment. She starts them, she doesn't finish them. She just can't focus in class.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with her. I just want to make that very clear. It's not like
of course.
they just, when we have you're going to find that your daughter is totally able to focus in some areas of life, completely able to stay in tune with some areas.
Oh, I mean, if she's watching YouTube shorts she'll stay focused for a long time. But
That's what I'm saying. And there's nothing less inherent. I mean, there's nothing inherently less valuable than a YouTube video versus a teacher with a chalkboard. It's not inherently less valuable. It's just more interesting.
well, I mean, that's a matter of debate whether it's less valuable. Some of the YouTube videos she watches, I'm just like, what is the point of these? Like, they're not teaching you anything.
You might be able to make that case in some first grade classes as well. What's the point?
Well, I mean, I get that. Yeah, I mean, it's just,
it's very troubling for the parents. Of course, you're working very hard, and my heart's out to you. I totally get that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you try to figure out the best thing to do for your kids, and sometimes there's no real answers, and it's like, do I just let them be happy, or do I have to medicate them up? Like, it's just like, I don't know what to do at that point. Like, it's just one of those things.
I would love to meet her. If that can be arranged, that would be something I would be eager to do, and just really see what I can do to assist you and your family.
Well, I mean, that could possibly be arranged. I can't promise she'll pay much attention because she'll probably run off and do something 5 seconds later, but we could try. But your typical mental illnesses, the more serious ones in ADHD, like, how do you undoctor them? Say, I guess, bipolar, schizophrenia, pick one.
Yeah. So these bipolar and schizophrenia, even the whole essence of what those things are or what they're not, or how they get diagnosed or when they get diagnosed or who diagnoses them and why, or who comes in to get confirmation of those diagnoses and why, and whether or not the treatments once begun actually do perpetuate or cause the symptoms they're marketed to treat, thereby putting the cart in front of the horse and actually creating the condition in the aftermath, is really important to get. So the toxins that exist, have you noticed there's a fair amount of toxins in the world these days?
Oh, God, yeah. God, yeah.
Okay, you've noticed that. Good. Yeah, so the things we hear, the things we watch, the things we take in our nose, the things we take in our mouth, the things we don't take in our mouth, the things that we don't hear, the things that we don't think, that the spirituality or the connectedness that we might not have to what it really means to be alive, often causes a funky way to think that's seemingly way different from what we very arrogantly call normal. So we have this hubris that thinks that if you and I are sort of aligned with what normal is, that we have the corner market on what normal is, and that those people out there who think like that or act like that or behave like that are abnormal. Now, here's the thing that I really do know from experience. As I think I said to you earlier, the idea, if you really want to know what psychosis is, if you really want to know what schizophrenia is, start taking antipsychotics. If you did that, you would know what schizophrenia is pretty soon after that, because it actually causes those symptoms. Now, this is often true with the bipolar medicines as well, and people don't like to think that. It's so nefarious. It feels like it's really evil. And you pointed to the psychopharma, big pharma. It's not like big pharma itself is evil. It's not like it's evil. It's actually an amazing business plan. It's a super awesome business plan. If you can create the symptoms your product is marketed to treat, you've done a pretty good job at cornering the market. You have created a market that can deliver a margin of several $1 billion per day. Oh, that's what they're doing. Oh, I can't blame them for that. I really can't. It's an amazing business model because it's not them. It's like you can't blame a pill for anything. The idea is someone has to agree to take those pills. Someone has to decide that there's something wrong with them enough that they go to a clinician or a so-called expert in this speculative science world, that they get themselves a diagnosis that accurately relinquishes them from the parts of their life that they're uncomfortable or non-proud of, that by giving them a diagnosis and then giving them a treatment in the form of a medication that they then agree to take because they're afraid not to be non-compliant or afraid not to listen to an expert. And then once that occurs, the whole thing gets perpetuated. The razor blade and the Band-Aid actually shows up, and we start getting blood seeping from the Band-Aid, thinking that the cut got worse, when in fact there's a razor blade and a Band-Aid. Now, this really does happen, I think, inside of the psychiatric world. I am equipped to speak to the psychiatric world. It may even extend to other areas of medicine. One thing that's really interesting about psychiatry, of course, is that when people come to a psychiatrist to get assessed or evaluated, if I tell them that they're okay, they get pissed. It's like, what? Like that doesn't happen in any other medical field. If you go to an oncologist or you go to a surgeon or you go to a proctologist or an ophthalmologist and they tell you you're okay, you're like, okay, good, I'm okay. In psychiatry, if you tell somebody they're okay, they just get furious. They just think that I don't know what I'm talking about. Then they go next door to get their diagnosis so that they can have an opportunity to blame the parts of their life that aren't working out very well on a condition, so they no longer are entirely responsible for it. Now, the disclaimer that I gave you earlier holds true here too. That's not true for every single person. There are some people who have received the type of diagnosis and treatment and medications and protocols that work for them. And they, if you're listening, should just continue to do exactly what you're doing. Please keep doing exactly what you're doing.
I mean, I agree. I mean, if you find something that works for you, then keep it working, obviously.
Yep, of course.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, yes, Bill Watterson said it best, the creator of Calvin Hobbes. He said, be yourself. The world will adjust.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. Not to quote a freaking comic strip from the 80s and 90s, but that's the way it should be.
Calvin and Hobbes is as contemporary as any comic strip ever. Thanks for bringing him up and for bringing Calvin and Hobbes up. They're amazing. It's beautiful comics. And look, be yourself. Everyone else is taken is another way to look at this whole thing. And it's a real opportunity to step into yourself. Here's what I know. I've spoken to a lot of people who have been diagnosed with schizophrenia. I've worked in prisons and jails, and I've worked in countless inpatient units. And what I know is that when I connect with the core source of who that person is in a way of really getting their humanity, that magic happens. I'm telling you, there's a human there. There's a real human there who only has an altered way or a different way of looking how the world occurs. And if they're medicated, they're actually chemically imbalanced already because they're medicated, not because they have a condition, but because the medication we gave them actually imbalances their chemicals. And when I connect with that person, that's where undoctoring really happened. The idea is if I can infiltrate early enough, and if there's not enough medication, sometimes there's 10, 12, 15 medicines on board and my hands are up. I don't have anything I can do about that. Or if someone's been taking medicines for 20, 30 years, it's very little I can do about that because every single day they have confirmed to themselves that they're mentally ill. But if someone's early on in the mental illness treatment, and you're not going to find somebody who's taking really great care of themselves and then comes along with schizophrenia or bipolar very often. The idea is there's a list of about 20 things that we can do that can keep us steady, that can keep us focused, that can keep us available. We just have to really take those on in the world of those things that I've already said, which are listed in the Moss method, which is central to my program.
Which makes me think, though, can this apply to people who are, I mean, say they're not diagnosed, say they're not medicated yet, but what if they're hurting themselves or others?
You know, people generally don't hurt themselves or others if they're not intoxicated in one way, shape, or form. Now, I'm not saying by drinking or drugs. That's not the only intoxication that there is. What they're watching, what they're seeing, who they're hanging out with, what they're hearing, those kinds of things. The average person is not that interested in keeping themselves in good, healthy condition and hurting others. But here's another point. We all hurt others. We do. You've hurt people at times inadvertently and even on those rare occasions intentionally. And okay, so, and we're not talking about that level of hurt, but for the people who throw hand grenades into a McDonald's or who do school shootings or that kind of obvious big stuff, almost invariably, if you do any kind of history with them, they've been on psychiatric medicine for a while.
Yeah, I mean, usually they have a psychiatrist they've been seeing for a long time who keeps them
and
well
they've
medicated.
been on medicines. That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at any of their history, that usually is the case, whether it be any of the famous ones or not. Usually they're medicated to some degree.
You know, there are famous ones out there who, you know, are just crazy serial killers. But that doesn't mean that giving them a psychiatric diagnosis is going to help anything anyways. It's like saying my toaster doesn't work, so I'm going to throw it out the window and see if it gets better. Okay, we got some people who are not very kind or who are really evil at core. There are some people like that. I'm not telling you that's okay. I'm just telling you that's a function of the human condition. And we get to live with 7.8 billion people of all kinds. We just get to do that. And it's a smorgasbord of life that we're all faced with. What does it really mean when I say welcome to humanity? It's everything from the entirely miserable, the unspeakable, the intolerable on one side, to everything that's so beautiful, ecstatic, and wonderful on the other side. Last night I saw the Aurora Borealis. It was right from my front door. It was out there. I couldn't believe it. But there was a couple people at 11. We took the 11 o'clock walk. There were people just with their cameras out because your phone can show the colors of the Aurora Borealis apparently better than your regular eyesight. And I got to see the Northern Lights yesterday, and the moon was most amazing. And I really got at that moment, boy, life can be spectacular for moments.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, astonishingly spectacular. And at the same time, I got a bit of the news this morning, or a little bit of stuff that's going on over there, or with them, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, man, life just blows at the same time. And we're really looking at the invitation through meditation, which your guests have brought forward, and it sounds like you know a little bit about, to really get that all of these things are sort of flowing in and out of our life. And as long as we don't attach to any of them and call them us, we get to live a life of embracing all of it and considering the wonderful nature of everything, from the very real bitter to the very super sweet.
I mean, yeah, it's basically you got to take the good with the bad. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's yin and there's yang in this whole universe, and there always will be. I mean, yes. I mean, and I didn't get to see the Aurora Borealis last night. I took my dogs out around 10 o'clock. I didn't see nothing, and I don't know. Apparently, where I was, it wasn't exactly like the most visible, but still, like I've seen it on Facebook nonstop today about people seeing it. But I mean, maybe I'll make it to Alaska sometime to see it, but I'd love to. But I mean, it's just life gives you good and life gives you bad. That's the bottom line. I mean, yes, you know what? I may have a great day in my life, but at some point during my day, I'm probably gonna go to a convenience store or Dunkin' Donuts or something and see somebody treating a freaking worker like shit.
Yeah.
And am I gonna be the person to stand there and confront them about it? No, because that's not my place in the world. Unless it gets really bad, then I may. But I mean, if it's just somebody being disgruntled, I'm not gonna say anything because that's not my point. That's not my purpose in life.
Yeah,
I'm not there to.
I hear you. People get very upset. People get attached to the way that they feel, and they think that's what's so. And then people get angry, or they get irritated, or they get triggered, or they actually go off and they say or do crazy things. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying the world is a fine place and everyone is beautiful. I'm not really saying.
God, no.
What I'm really saying is that it does take all kinds, and just that dude, whether it be the person who's treating another person like junk. That certainly doesn't confirm that there's something mentally ill about that person. Not at all.
No, I mean, actually, okay, that's a good segue into a good question here. How do you know if someone is actually mentally ill?
I don't ever know that. I've worked with some people who are, declared to be confirmed and affirmed as being mentally ill. And when I talk to them, and when I really if I'm willing to, mental illness is a function of the beholder. Basically, the diagnoser has to determine that you're outside the range of normal and then make that declaration from a very hubris standpoint. The idea that I know what normal is because I'm a diagnoser, and normal sits in those boxes, and you're outside of the box that I'm comfortable with, so that must make you abnormal, which makes you mentally ill. The DSM is a book that's very arbitrary, and it's in how it got designed from the very beginning. And frankly, it's not like psychiatrists are thumbing through the DSM all day long. They're not. They hear the different buzzwords. They hear racing thoughts, or they hear hearing voices, or they hear awkward in a social setting, or they hear scattered and incompletion of tasks. And they jump just as fast as anybody into the diagnosis that's associated with that. And then they label or smack you with that diagnosis, which you then get to carry around as luggage for the rest of your life. It's very hard to undiagnose somebody officially. It really does take something. And, they have to diagnose. That's the other thing, is that everybody is counting on third-party payers to pay the bill when you see a psychiatrist. And if the psychiatrist writes no diagnosis on their diagnosis, they won't get paid for that exact visit.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to a barbershop enough times, which apparently I have, you get a haircut. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, I agree. I mean, psychiatrists. I was forced to go to a therapist in middle school, high school,
Yeah,
because I was immature.
yeah,
And gee, sorry, I'd rather associate with adults than associate with kids my own age. How
yeah,
does that make me immature? I
right.
to this day don't get my parents what the fuck they were thinking. But I mean, it's just I don't think therapists do anything. I to this day like I don't think therapists do anything. Like even
Right.
as a kid, I didn't think they did anything really because I just would talk to them about random stuff, wrestling at the time, whatever,
Yeah.
like video games, like and it just they were just sitting there collecting their paycheck. They would let me talk about whatever I want to talk about, and they were for the hour just to get their paycheck. And it's just, what's the point of me going to you if you're just gonna sit there and listen to me talk about random stuff? You're not gonna try to get to the root of the issues if there is any even. Like it's just,
Yeah. Well, some therapists, are somehow slightly more, maybe more effective than others, and it's true that a therapist is really the job is there is to somehow be a unilateral friend, to actually support you and have you feel like they're there to, in some ways, agree with you and to assist you along the lines. But in the conversation where they're just sitting there, it doesn't do what it's promised to do. Coaching and again, more like meditation, finding yourself in the midst of this crazy obstacle filled, hurdle filled, challenge filled life of ours requires some connection with another human, but not necessarily does it require any kind of formalized mental health treatment.
I mean, I agree to some degree. I mean, all right, I'll give you an example because my wife is pregnant, about 3 months. We were at the hospital a couple weekends ago, and this guy, we were at the hospital like 10, like we went to the hospital like at 8 o'clock at night. We ended up leaving around like midnight because she still hadn't getting seen, and it's just ridiculous the way that hospitals run nowadays. But anyway, this guy walked in about halfway through the time we were there, and you could tell there was something off about him. He walks in, he's like, "I am the chief of the United States,"
Uh-huh.
and then he starts saying, "I'm Prince Williams. I'm
Uh,
Prince William." Like
okay.
there's something off about this guy. Like they had to get the head nurse to come out and like basically escort him out. They called the cops and everything. Like
Yeah. So
what they typically do.
I guarantee he's intoxicated, probably with psychiatric medicine.
Probably because he seemed like they straight up said we're going to call the local police department. He said, "Oh, I was just there,"
If you want to be psychotic, start taking those medicines.
which I mean it
It's
makes
that simple.
sense.
It's that
It
simple.
ma-
Of course,
it
it
makes
makes sense.
sense.
Yeah, it's a great
I
business
mean it is. I mean you said that a couple times now, and I agree. It's a great business model. I mean, hell, if I can get in on it, I would get in on it because it's a way to make money.
Yeah,
And
beautiful.
yes, I I tip my hat to Mr. Mark Cuban for trying to make certain medications more affordable for people because they need it, diabetes medicine and whatnot. But other than that, like I don't think he's touched psychiatric medicine yet because I don't think he wants to play in that ball field because that's a ball field a lot of people don't want to play in if they're good people. Like it's just
A lot of people think that providing more mental health care is what's being asked for in this very sick world. But you could make a case that the mental health care that's been provided has made the world as sick as it is, and more mental health care is only going to be gasoline on the fire. You can make
I
that
mean
case.
I mean take ADHD, ADAD for example. 50 years ago, that wasn't even a diagnosis.
Wasn't even a thing. No.
That kid just needs to get the switch. That's what it was back then. The kid needs to get the switch and they'll straighten out.
Yeah,
Or
there's
that kid needs
a lot of diagnoses. Most of the diagnoses in our present day and age didn't exist back then.
they weren't. I mean,
They
I
certainly
think
didn't exist like they look now. That's for sure. None of them did. Not even schizophrenia and bipolar. They were totally different. It wasn't even
I
called.
mean I've worked when I was in college. I worked with kids that were in high school. Even I worked with kids who were considered special. And for those listening on Spotify forum, I'm using air quotes when I say special because they weren't really special. They just needed attention. Maybe they needed a little more attention paid to them. Maybe they needed to talk to somebody.
They just need to be heard. That's what people want.
And yeah, people want to be talked to. I mean,
Yeah.
if you that guy walking down the street that you see that may be talking to himself, maybe have a conversation with him. I mean, don't follow him anywhere for God's sake. Please don't. But just
Yeah.
have a conversation with him on the street, and
Yeah.
maybe he'll stop talking to himself if you talk to him. Maybe he just wants.
maybe there's something to learn, and maybe we all would talk to ourselves if it wasn't so civilly unacceptable.
Well, I mean, I was always told it's okay to talk to yourself as long as you don't answer yourself.
Yeah, that's just a story made up from the industry.
Oh, I mean, I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah.
So, I just, I guess the next question I have is, how, like, how does, because I imagine that art and other creative forms have to play into this. Like, they have to be able to help people like this express themselves better. Like, if someone's not good at talking because they stutter or because they go off on tangents, like, I have to imagine that some form of art, some form of creation would help them
Yeah.
express themselves better.
Yeah, so this book right here, The Creative Eight, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression, it just kind of helps people to see that art and music and dancing and singing and drama and cooking and writing and gardening, those are the eight, really do help people in the process. When you're involved in creating, the symptoms or the imbalances and the discomfort that you feel actually goes away in that process. And it's just another form of expressing ourselves. We are so dependent on this idea of vocality and putting together words and sentences and then listening and processing and responding and all that stuff as our only way of communication. Our world has become thinking that, we're bad artists or bad musicians or bad dancers, and we therefore don't do it. But it's really just a form of self-expression and really allows for a more empathic or a more profound connection frequently than what words and listening actually have to say.
Which makes sense. I mean, if you can express yourself through other ways than words, better. If you can express yourself better through those methods, then
That's right.
I mean, the psychiatrists who have been using paintings or drawings to help their patients are the ones that are actually on the right steps, I think.
Yeah.
If you're just gonna sit there and talk and listen to them talk for an hour and then give them a freaking script for a pill, then you're not really doing your job, I don't think.
Right. Exactly.
Which, I mean, it's just sad. And one thing that I think is making it worse, though, is with all this AI technology coming out nowadays, you don't know what's like. I can look at something online on Facebook, on Twitter, or whatever, X, whatever it's called now, and I could see something and be like, "Oh, that's awesome." I wonder if it's actually real or not, because I know AI exists, and I don't know if something's. Half the time I see a picture, I'm like, I don't know if that's real or not. Because
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a paranormal guy. I see pictures of Bigfoot all the time, and they're AI creations, and it's just like, if they don't write that, how the hell am I supposed to know that? Am I supposed to think that's a real picture of Bigfoot crystal clear? Like, come on.
Well, as the paranormal guy, one of the things you can get is that reality is really always tentative. It's always fleeting, 100% of the time. There's
Yes.
what we think is real isn't really real in the first place, and AI just really just amplifies that whole notion.
It does. I mean, it just makes life harder. I mean, I can't imagine being someone who thinks they have schizophrenia or something along those lines, and then all of a sudden your phone talks back to you, and you're just like, "Am I hearing voices or is it my phone?"
Yeah.
That would be terrifying. I think if you have schizophrenia or anything along that line.
Back when I was learning and when I was in residency in like 1989, one of the first signs of someone with schizophrenia was that they were talking to the TV screen. And now 100% of us talk to our TV screen all day long.
There's even a button on your remote to talk to your TV screen nowadays, for God's sake.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know. I mean, I feel like they're making the world worse for people who are already feel like they're mentally ill. I feel like they're making the world worse. Which
it's not. Yeah, it's not better. It's not easier. That's for sure.
I mean, part of me thinks it'd be better if we actually did go back to if some kind of apocalyptic event that didn't kill everybody did happen, and we went back to the old school way of farming and just bartering for stuff instead of money. Like,
we always reminisce. Ages and ages, people have thought that it was easier back then.
I mean, in some degree it was, but in some degrees it definitely wasn't. I mean, having to go if you God forbid you have a craving for a certain fruit or something or a vegetable, and you can't go to the store and just pick it up, and you have to go like find somebody who grew that vegetable or fruit and has it available at that moment. Like, it's just another whole.
A whole different.
It's a little bit more challenging. I mean, and or God forbid you need some metal work or woodwork done, and
Yeah.
there's not a specialist you could just call on the phone to have him come to your house and do
It
it.
was a
Like it's
different life. Always difficult. Life has always been the most difficult that it's ever been, but it's only got a life slightly more difficult.
yeah, it has. And all right, well, before I go into my final amazing question here that I'm gonna do it towards it in a little bit, I gotta ask, as this is a paranormal podcast,
Yeah.
and you just said you think reality is perceptive. What you think reality is what it is.
Fleeting and tentative.
Do you do you believe that extraterrestrials exist and that they're among us, possibly?
Here's what I believe. I've been in homes where there's been ghosts for sure. Like they're at least ghosts. That's at the very least. And I was there with my cats. I was living in the city. I was like temporarily house sitting at a home that was just packed with. I had a whole family or two of ghosts in there. And my cats would see the ghosts every so often because they would start hissing at something that wasn't even visible by the human eye.
Mm-hmm.
I could really see them, and I knew it because so I'd wake up in the morning and different lights were on that I didn't turn on, and different doors were open that I didn't open, and I could feel their presence down in the basement. I still never went down in that basement. I was there for 2 months. There was no way in the world I was ever going down that basement. In fact, on my last 2 days there, I had the place for free for the summer because I was house sitting. On my last 2 days there, I was so terrified I stayed in a hotel. Even though the place was free, because I knew that there was terrestrials or extra somethings there. Now, are there things from other planets or other galaxies that are presently occupying? I don't see any reason why there isn't. I don't have anything against the whole idea. And it seems to me like it's entirely possible. Of course, it would explain a lot. And many of the explanations that I've got from either Middle Earth or from outside coming in, make enough sense to be like, oh yeah, that would explain an entirely new dimension that we otherwise are being, kept from, veiled from. So I think that's, it isn't like I've never been, what's it called?
Abducted.
But some people have, and those stories are totally remarkable when they're abducted. I am down with them. I get it. They sure seem authentic.
I mean, they do. I actually had a couple on here, Leslie and Stephen Shaw, I believe their names were, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry if I'm mixing it up, guys. But a couple weeks ago, and he is a third generation abductee,
There you
and
go.
like his family's been getting abducted for 3 generations. Like that's
Got it.
and they had so much proof of it that's just ridiculous. They wrote books about it and everything. Like I mean, yeah, okay. Well, I like that you think that way. I really do.
Yeah.
And trust me, I live in a house that's infested with ghosts, from what mediums tell me. Whether they're living here or just visiting, I always seem to have a plethora of ghosts around me, and they don't bother.
Most of them are okay.
They don't bother me. They don't bother my dogs. They don't bother my chickens, my kids, my wife. They don't bother nobody.
Where do you live?
Massachusetts.
Okay. Yeah. I stayed in the opera house down in Death Valley as well. That place was literally packed like inch by inch with ghosts. That place had ghosts everywhere. It was incredible. Oh. And that's what they said, a haunted house or whatever. And it's like, dude.
Yeah.
It was not like questionable. It was very obvious.
I mean, these things exist. The paranormal exists for a reason. It's just a science that can't be explained yet.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're pretty close to explaining ghosts, I think, honestly, in the science. I think we are pretty close. I think the day's gonna come where we're gonna have, whether it be a VR set or something, where we can all see every ghost in our house. And I think that I think Ghostbusters is close to coming true. I honestly think it is. Like, there's gonna be something that could let us see things. It's just the way it goes. But well, before we bid Dr. Fred adieu, I gotta ask, how do you really find your true voice? Like, what is the best way to do that?
So it's really getting that you're not speaking your true voice. That's the first thing. Getting that, in fact, you're pretending to be someone you're not in order to protect the person you are. And that's okay. Give yourself forgiveness and acceptance about that. Really understanding that that's how you got trained. That's how it developed. That's, that was the whole purpose of school, to teach you how to do what they wanted rather than what you knew was right. And the crack in the cement has gotten larger and larger over time. We've never just gone back and repaired it. So one of the things to do is to really get access to that, to get access to the fear that you have about actually speaking your truest self. And, some people have gone so far to start saying things that even they don't believe as if it's what they stand for. That's just ridiculous. That's just preposterous, ludicrous, absurd. And, people do that. And if you're really going to get a handle on what it is your true voice, you start really looking inside. You don't have to go out there to discover your true voice. It's with you. You have it. It's underneath the muck. It's underneath the rust. It's underneath the mud. It's underneath the cobwebs. And you just get to it and start speaking openly and honestly with the people in your life about what's really so. Now, you take incremental steps. We don't want you to take big, giant steps. It's not like running to the local hill and running up the top and telling you how much you hate your mother-in-law. That's not what I'm talking about. It's about really saying the things that matter to you, to the people in your inner world, in such a way that authenticity wins. Once you start getting authentic, it's totally addicting. Totally. It's totally addicting. It's so much more interesting than agreement. It's so much more interesting than inauthenticity. And when you start doing that, you create a space for other people to get authentic as well, resonating with them like the tuning forks that we are of humanity. And in that same frequency, we get to actually explore what it means to feel better, what it means to be honest, what it means to be accepting, what it means to be, unattached. And from there, that's where healing comes. And we've already discussed that healing brings love, which is the whole purpose of being human on this planet in these 3 dimensions as we sit right now.
Exactly, folks. And just a warning: if you start being honest with who you truly are, you may lose some people you consider
You
friends.
might lose a friend or two. It's true.
But you know what?
If
they don't love your true voice, then they're not really your friends. They're just there to try to. They're there for some reason, but it's just not good. It's not good. It's not a good reason to be there. And trust me, I've never not spoken my truth to people, and I've never really had many friends because of that. But it's you know what? You find the one that's meant for you, and that's all that matters. You find your soulmate, and that's what I did. It took me It took me 29 years to find my soulmate.
I'm glad
I found her though. I did, and now I have 2 amazing stepkids and a biological kid in the way. So I love my soul. My soulmate is who I found, and she's perfect. And well, as perfect as I expect her to be. But nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect in this world. So get that perception out of your fucking head. But I want to thank Dr. Fred for coming on, because it's been an amazing hour and it's been an amazing talk. But tell them, Dr. Fred, where can they find you? Where can they find everything you've done? Just promote
everything I've done. The best place to look is at drfred360.com, at drfred360.com. You can see everything I'm up to, my podcast as a host, my podcast as a guest, my PDFs of my 2 books. You can get a couple different freebies or lead magnets that are there. You can get access to me directly. You can get all my LinkedIn and all my social media network entryways. It's a pretty cool site. And another place to go is to welcometohumanity.net. And you can find, that's my main website. And a lot of things are happening there these days as well, including the essence of the Moss method. And then I hang around a little bit in social media, a little bit on Facebook. I don't really like Facebook, but I do find myself there every day. And I like LinkedIn a lot better. LinkedIn is where I, meet the coolest people who are up to the coolest stuff. And it seems more above board than the other social media.
Well, there you go, folks. That's where you can find Dr. Fred. And you all know where you can find me by now. If you don't, just freaking shame. Shame. Shame on your cow. Shame on your house. All that good stuff. But check the outro if you really don't know, for all my listeners and all my watchers. Just watch where you're watching this, and you'll see me live all the time. But I do want to thank Dr. Fred for coming on, because it's been an enlightening hour. It's been a fun hour.
Yeah.
I mean, talking against Big Pharma, you all know I love that. You all know I love it. It's a passion. But thank you all for coming out and checking it out. Thank you for watching, listening, however you're grabbing this great info. And have a good weekend and a good night. Other than that, I will see you this week at some point, I'm sure.
Peace.